What's up, everybody? I'm John Middlekauff. You know what I need you to do. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. We got content for days reacting to every NFL game all the time, every single day. Subscribe, like the videos. Let's go. What is going on, everybody? Hopefully, everyone's having a great day. My game plan when I got up on Monday was to just do a long mailbag. Got a million questions. Obviously, it was a long weekend. We put out a bunch of content. Uh, I hate that word, but podcasts and videos over the weekend, reacting on Saturday night. Colin and I reacted yesterday. I put out something after the Eagles game before that. So I was like, I'll just do a bang out a bunch of questions. And then sitting here having a sandwich at about, I don't know, 1:45, I get a text that Ben Johnson has been hired by the Chicago Bears. So I actually got a DM yesterday, an unsolicited DM from someone I don't even know. I mean, granted, I get a lot of those, but said, hey, I know some people who know some people, and you watch. Ben Johnson will be the next head coach of the Chicago Bears. Whoever sent me that, you nailed it. So props to you, and I'll give this. This will just be a some thoughts on the Bears here because it's a big deal. It really is, and congratulations if you're a Chicago Bear fan. In the simple fact that it the last 12 months, I guess the last 12 months weren't because you got Caleb, but I would say the post Caleb Eberflus season had to be as shitty as it gets. I mean, that's just, I've been watching sports for 30 plus years, rooting, watching, gambling, seeing the ebbs and flows, seen it all. And that's about as low as you get. That you talk about, especially when you come into a season with hype. So we'll just dive into that. I think that's the headline story here is that Chicago Bears have hired Ben Johnson. I started to believe, again, like I'm not some insider here, just reading reports from insiders, that Tom Brady was giving him a full on pitch. And Ben Johnson was more than intrigued. It was like he was inclined to take the Raider job. And I told Colin on Sunday night that that's insane. They have no quarterback. I just saw a quote from Max Crosby that's like, yeah, I got no guaranteed money left. We got a lot to talk about. And it wasn't just like, I want more money here. I think Max Crosby will inevitably be traded this offseason. It's probably the right move. Just blow that shit up, nuke the Raiders. But from a job standpoint, they got no quarterback. They have no direction to get a quarterback. And the reason you would have been taking that job was for Tom Brady, who lives in Florida. So you'd be going into the job every day. Now, they started interviewing what we think was his buddy, Adam Peters' right-hand man, who has been in Detroit for 25 years. So you thought, well, if they hire him, Ben Johnson gets his GM. That's not what he gets here in Chicago. Like, he has to work with Ryan Poles. But clearly, he just looked at it. I would rather take my chances to resurrect Caleb's NFL career. At least we have a quarterback under contract who was just the number one pick in the draft and widely considered, fair or not, right or wrong, the best prospect we've seen in a long time. Long time would be strong. I mean, Trevor Lawrence was viewed really highly. Shows you what being the best prospect, doesn't always pan out. Now, sometimes Andrew Luck, Peyton Manning, John Elway, Matt Stafford. But I totally understand. They got good defensive pieces, and it's the Chicago Bears. I mean, it's one of the biggest cities in America. It's a diehard sports city, and the number one team in that city is the Bears. And they have some historic teams. I mean, the Chicago Bulls had a guy named Michael Jordan. The Chicago Cubs are just, one of the more high profile baseball teams. I know they've been down recently, but obviously when Theo and they won that World Series, it was a really big. It's just a great sports town, and like I understand being intrigued by it. If you're Ben Johnson, clearly you got a lot of money, but it this division really well. Like if you just think about like what's his advantage taking this job, it's like he knows this division like the back of his hand. Think about it. He's been calling, offense. So he's been game planning against the Bears defense, which now is his defense. The Lions defense, like every day in training camp for 3 years and seeing them every day in practice. Obviously, the Green Bay Packers and the Minnesota Vikings. So his comfort level with the personnel in these 6 games honestly couldn't be higher. And not just his comfort level with the personnel, but his comfort level with the coordinators. He got to face Halfley twice this year. Obviously, he knows Flores now. He's seen him a couple years in a row. And regardless of who, we assume Aaron Glenn is either going to get the Jets, the Saints, one of the Jags, one of these jobs. He is going to know maybe not the next coordinator unless it's a guy that they elevate from the staff. But he's like they're not going to drastically change what they do, so he's going to be very comfortable there. And anytime you make the transition from a coordinator to a head coach, most guys, it's a little weird. Honestly, like I don't blame him for doing this because when you looked at the landscape, I didn't think any of these jobs were any good. The Jags, the Raiders, the Bears, but I do get staying. It's an easy comfort level. But like those are your guys. Like you've just been in the trenches with them trying to win a Super Bowl for the last whatever 12 plus months, really 18, and you got so close. You were the number 1 seed this year, and now you just bounce. I mean, it's part of the gig, right? There's only so many jobs open, but oftentimes that guy like leaves the conference or definitely leaves the division. So anytime you get a divisional, carryover like that from an assistant coach, always adds like an element of intrigue. And so if I'm a Bears fan, one, just the simple fact that we got the number 1 guy. We got the number 1 guy on the market. The Raiders wanted him. The Jags wanted him. He didn't even interview with the Jets. They definitely would take him. If he said, I want your job, they would hire him tomorrow. The Saints would obviously take him. I don't even know what Jerry's doing. That'll be a conversation for another day. But you got the number 1 head coach on the market. You celebrate. You celebrate this. And I think Lions fans had just come to grips with well before the last couple of weeks. Like this guy was gone. He was going to take a job. And if anything, you should be lucky that you got this extra season with him. And we'll dive into them in a second, but it's an overall great day for the franchise, which, let's face it, has not had many great days in recent memory. Beside like the trade Ryan Poles pulled off. But in terms of coaches, the Eberflus situation, this year was a coaching disaster. From Eberflus getting fired to them. Last year, they fired a bunch of coaches during the season. They've just had a lot of weird shit going on. Obviously, they elevated Thomas Brown. He's completely over his head. The team looked even worse. It was a sad state of affairs. And when you have, like, the NFL is very lucky right now that they're not beholden to these big markets, right? Like, the Niners sucked this year. Who cares? Doesn't matter. The Bears haven't been good in a decade. The Jets, the Giants, they've sucked a lot recently. And the league just keeps on trucking along. Like last year, the Saturday night game was Niners-Packers. And this year, it was the Detroit Lions and the Washington Commanders, 2 franchises that have not been important to the league over the last 25 years. And a little less people watched than last year. I don't know, 2 of the most historic franchises in the league. But you're not beholden to like the NBA, the Major League Baseball. It's Dodgers, Lakers, Celtics, Yankees. You need those teams or you got no fucking chance. No one will watch the Oklahoma City Thunder. Hell, the Denver Nuggets, who have been really good. People just don't watch it. That's not the case in the NFL. And like, if you can get, like, if Dayball could ever get the Giants rolling, if whoever gets the Jets job can get it rolling, if Ben Johnson can roll with the Chicago Bears, you like become a legend. Like, I don't think people quite understand, probably outside the DC area, how big a deal it is for Dan Quinn and Jaden Daniels to resurrect that franchise. This isn't some random, this is not like resurrecting the Jags. It's just not, So resurrecting that franchise and have them in a game is a really, really big deal. So the pressure, like, there's no disputing the pressure on Ben Johnson, for as cool as this moment is, starts pretty quickly. And this is not like you take over the Raiders job, there aren't really that many expectations immediately. Like, you're going to get a long grace period. Now, I would imagine he's going to have a long contract, so I'm not acting like he would get fired if he struggles. But the expectations, it's why Eberflus and everyone got blown out, because the expectations are going to be really, really high. They're going to go, we got a lot of good players. We said the number 1 overall pick in the draft. We got some cap space. Time to roll. You don't need to win 12 games right away, but we have a better roster than the Commanders, right? And the Commanders in year 1 with just credible coaches, people that knew what they were doing, a new GM with a lot of history that knew what he was doing. are in the NFC Championship game. We don't even want that. Can we just compete for a wild card spot? Can we just be like the last couple weeks of the season, have a chance to make the playoffs, have a chance to get 9 or 10 wins? That is a successful first season. But those are kind of going to be the expectations. There's no like, well, his first year he went 4 or 5 wins because he's basically being hired, and rightfully so, to fix and get this quarterback good and this offense to not look as putrid as it did last season. The problem is when his offense was rolling these last couple years in Detroit, their offensive line was elite. I mean, no team in the league played their 6 offensive linemen more than them. So Skipper. So their offensive line to protect the quarterback. Now, granted, Jared Goff is a lot different player than Caleb Williams, but like their offensive line with the Chicago Bears was like embarrassingly bad. And part of it was Caleb holding the ball too long and the pressure on him to kind of get that out of him. Part of what they did in Detroit with this offense, like, here's the thing, Caleb, we're bringing my offense. Like, this offense works, so can you run it? Now, obviously, you can't just be too stubborn as a coach. Like, what type things Caleb likes, you would be, I mean, you would not be doing your job if not only you ask him, but you implement some of that in your offense because he's a different player than Jared Goff. He's just not as accurate. But there are going to be elements like we like snapping the ball, getting the ball out of our hands. That is what we do. One, because we're going to have to do it with the offensive line. And two, because like that's how I play. And that's what I want to do. And obviously running the ball was such a huge part of what Detroit did. That's something that this year with starting with Ryan Poles, I mean, they built a passing team. They built a team that was like, in theory, was trying to play like a dome team. And Dan Campbell built a dome team that actually was built to play outside. Obviously, the injuries took its toll on their defense. But in terms of offensively, they could play like the Ravens. We'll run it 40 times in a game. Even though Todd Monken in the playoffs never does that. He's obsessed with passing. But again, another conversation for another day. NFL playoffs. We're talking about the NFL playoffs. You bet we are. Get in on the action at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. Scoring touchdowns is a key to winning in the NFL playoffs. And the key to you scoring big is betting on them at DraftKings, the number one place to bet touchdowns. Ready to place your first bet? Try betting on something as simple like a player to score a touchdown. Go to DraftKings Sportsbook app and make your pick. Here's another reason to watch your favorite players crush it in the playoffs. New customers bet $5 to get $200 in bonus bets instantly. Score big during the NFL playoffs with the DraftKings Sportsbook. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app. Use the code JOHN, J-O-H-N. That's code JOHN for new customers to get $200 in bonus bets instantly when you bet just $5. Only on DraftKings Sportsbook. The crown is yours. The thing that makes me a little nervous, and all reports as of recording this, is he's going to hire Dennis Allen as his defensive coordinator. Excellent defensive coordinator. The best part about the NFL, not everyone's meant to be a number one. We've seen Dennis Allen try to be a head coach. It's not for him. But the best part about being a great number two is it pays a premium in the NFL. This is Wall Street on grass. Dennis Allen will make $3 or $4 million being the defensive coordinator for the Chicago Bears. And he's an important guy for Ben Johnson, given that he's been a head coach multiple spots and someone to lean on when you have questions about what to do things. Because anytime you go from coordinator, I've been saying this forever, go from coordinator to head coach, it changes, obviously, financially your life, but it changes the way you do business. Because every day is not just about sitting in a film room and drawing up plays for St. Brown, Laporta, and Jahmyr Gibbs. Like, you might have a player that gets a DUI that only plays on special teams. That's now your problem. You might have a coach whose kid's sick and needs to leave on the defensive side of the ball. That's your problem. You might have something happen to the owner. He wants to meet with you out of the blue. That's on you. Everything Dan Campbell dealt with, now Ben Johnson has to deal with. And while Ryan Poles now has been a general manager for a couple years, I looked at their ages before I hopped on. Ben Johnson's 38. Ryan Poles is 39. So, like, these are two really, really young guys. Obviously, Ben Johnson's never been a head coach before. And you would say Ryan Poles, like, has been a little over his head at times being a general manager. So the pressure on these two guys that are under 40 in a division full of high-level coaches, high-level players, well-run operations is going to be a big, big challenge. And back to what I said about, like, this is a pressure job. This is a job where just a lot of people are talking about you. A lot of people are working, are just kind of looking at what's going on. And a huge reason for that is Caleb Williams. So, like, there's just going to be a lot of eyeballs and a lot of people, like, I don't necessarily care about the Chicago Bears. I'm going to follow them really closely. This is a national team. The moment they got Caleb Williams, we're paying attention. We're judging them. Hell, we were judging them this year, not because of Matt Eberflus. Like, no one cares about Matt Eberflus. He's one of the worst coaches we've ever seen. Good defensive coordinator, just over his head as a head coach. But in terms of the story with Caleb Williams, like you had to pay attention if you're in the football business. So I'm just fascinated to watch these two guys who, Ben Johnson gets a clean slate, but there's like, assuming Ryan Poles keeps his job, does he know what he's doing? Does he know what he's doing? Because Ben Johnson came from a place where we hammered home physicality up front, which is ironic because Ryan Poles is an offensive lineman. He blocked for Matt Ryan at Boston College, but yet he built his team like he was a wide receiver or a DB. Like we build it on the perimeter instead of building it in the middle, right? Which most offensive linemen, like, why do you think Andy Reid over the years loves signing and drafting defensive and offensive linemen? Because he was an offensive lineman. Like, that's who he is. Dan Campbell, where did he line up? The line of scrimmage as a blocking tight end. I mean, that's his baby. Jim Harbaugh, which is all we make fun of him, and I remember reading an article in Sports Illustrated years ago that I think one of his teammates, either at Michigan or one of his teammates when he first got drafted to Chicago Bears, they said you realize early on Jim Harbaugh was just a linebacker in a quarterback's body. And some guys are wired differently. And I'll be fascinated to see Ben Johnson's influence. Did he think like Dan Campbell, or did he just call plays based on the players that Dan Campbell and the GM built? I don't know. But I'm not trying to poo-poo any of this. This is an awesome moment if you're a Bears fan. Cool moment for the NFL, because this is a guy that I think we've seen a short list of them over the years. Like Kevin O'Connell was not as famous when he was hired as this. Sean McVay definitely was not. I mean, we have seen guys, some of them have flopped and some of them have made it, right? Shane Steichen had a lot of hype because he was the offensive coordinator on a team that was kicking ass and taking names in the Super Bowl. And he got the job, and he's clearly, feels like by year two, a little in over his head. Josh McDaniels couldn't have been a more hyped, famous offensive coordinator over the years. Got his second opportunity with the Raiders and was an abomination. We've seen guys like Kyle Shanahan, ton of hype, same type deal with Ben Johnson, have success. But the one thing Kyle did when he got the Niner job is he got a clean slate. There wasn't any pressure because the team had sucked. And he got to bring in his GM. This is one of those, like, you kind of got to marry, like it's an arranged marriage with Poles. You got the Kevin Warren factor. And you just got, like, let's talk about the elephant in the room here. Ben Johnson, if Caleb's is not any good, it's not going to be Ben Johnson's fault. And if Caleb is good, he's going to get a lot of credit. So before it was like Caleb's going to save the Bears. Those days are over. Caleb is now in a partnership with Ben Johnson. And if we saw Ben Johnson last year, or excuse me, well, we obviously saw Ben, but we saw Caleb without coaching was bad. I mean, was borderline unplayable a lot of the games. Like, it was like, you're going to lose if this guy's your quarterback. So now if he's good, like, Ben Johnson's going to get, I mean, at minimum, be a 50-50 shareholder in this operation. It was kind of like Sean McVay when he got Jared Goff with the Rams. We saw Jared Goff as a rookie. He didn't even look like an NFL player. Then Sean McVay showed up. They started running the ball, and Jared Goff was a good player. Well, who got a lion's share of the credit? Sean McVay. That's going to happen here. And if you're Caleb, like, if it goes well, you're glad to share the credit because that means your team's winning and everything's going well. If it doesn't go well, no one's going to be like, well, Ben Johnson doesn't know what he's doing as an offensive coordinator. Because we've seen him as an offensive coordinator with Jared Goff, who got kicked to the curb, be awesome. So I'm fascinated by the dynamic of the conversation here, because we talk about pressure. There's pressure on the organization. There's pressure now on Ben Johnson and Ryan Poles. There's a ton of pressure on Caleb Williams. And a huge, huge reason for that is Jaden Daniels just had the greatest rookie season we've ever seen. We have never seen a rookie quarterback who's been asked to do this much carry a team to the NFC Championship game. I want to say they got no shot against the Eagles, but I think at this point in time, you'd be crazy to even utter those words. It might just be a stay away as a bet, right? But like, I don't know. How would you not give him a shot? He's fucking good. What would Howie Roseman do right now? Would he trade Jalen Hurts straight up for Jaden Daniels? What do you think? What happens if obviously you can't during the playoffs, but I'm just saying like if that conversation happened at the combine, who says no? Obviously, there's one guy that says no, and it's Adam Peters. Howie Roseman's like, do you want me to send him on a bus, or do you want me to drive him, or do you want Big Dom to fly him? Like, how do you want me to get him there? I mean, but that's what we're talking about. And you go, we've seen a lot of this. No, we've never seen this ever in the history of the game. Seen this, and let's face it, it's never been easier to play football. So, like, you're never a bad quarterback when you make a bad pass. Like Jalen Hurts threw a hospital ball yesterday to Devontae Smith. And throughout the majority of my life, Devontae Smith just gets laid out. It's an incompletion. Instead, now it's a 15-yard penalty. So all the rules are for the quarterbacks. And I'm not trying to act like Jalen shouldn't have thrown the ball, but 10 years ago, no one cares that Devontae's is laying there buckling his chin strap and hops back up and runs to the huddle. Instead, now 7 flags come out. It's like, oh, is he okay? Is he okay? And I get it. The league doesn't want to get sued. They're making too much money. But let's face it, that's never how the game's ever been officiated up until recently because you just put your offensive player in harm's way. And now that's the big benefit why playing quarterback, what Tom Brady said, is dead on the money. It's never been easier. The rules are on your side. So it's like, hey, Caleb, now you got an offensive coordinator. They drafted Rome. You got DJ under contract. You got Cole Kmet. Like, you got real players on offense. I mean, look at what Jaden's dealing with. You got Terry McLaurin. Then who? Like a backfield by committee, a McCaffrey brother who played at like 3 different schools in college. You got Brown's not bad from UNC. Ertz is 38 years old. I mean, what are we talking about? And so it's like, hey, you were the guy that everyone was blowing, not this guy. The Bears didn't even bring this guy in for an interview. And Adam Peters got just barbecued for bringing in all 5 of them. It's like, isn't that his job to scout all these guys? Ultimately, pick the right one. Who cares if he took all 5 of them to Top Golf? You just get to know him. That's his job. It's pre-draft process. So I think if Jaden just keeps playing well, it's like, this is a problem. And yeah, I'm just fascinated to watch this all play out. So congrats to the Bears. Got the number 1 guy. It's crazy. Like you see another. I saw a headline. The Colts have hired Lou Amaruno. Coordinator hires, like when a head coach hiring happens, a head coach is a 10 out of 10. A coordinator hire feels kind of irrelevant, even though like that's a good hire. I think Lou Amaruno is a good coach, and clearly the Colts are desperate for defense. But congrats to the Bears, man. That's just a cool football moment. That this story, it felt like they had no shot. Who they're going to hire? They're going to end up with Mike McCarthy, and they end up with Ben Johnson.